Good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening, depending on where in the world you are. My name is Michael Carducci, and I want to welcome you to the closing keynote here of Devnexus. And what an incredible day. And I have to say, it is an honor to share the stage with such luminaries who've spoken today, particularly LeVar Burton. What an honor and what a great keynote. But enough about that. I want to dive into our topic today. And this is a topic that I feel uniquely qualified to talk about as a man with a not insubstantial ego. We're talking about ego-driven development. And it started with this. I have always wanted to be great. I want to be a great coder. I want to be a great architect. I want to be a great presenter. I want to be a great speaker. And one of the cool things about speaking at any conference is you do get a lot of latitude about what you might talk about. And so I thought about this and I thought, I don't want to give a keynote about a technology or a framework that's just going to be obsolete in a couple of years. No, I want to talk about something that will change the world. And it started with this observation. There is a shortage of truly great developers in our industry. Over the last 10 years, I've been on stages in front of thousands of developers. I've worked with many hundreds of developers, or at least 100 or so, I would imagine, somewhat closely. And what I found is it is exceptionally rare to work with somebody that we consider to be truly great. Think about that for a moment. You might work with a lot of smart people or pleasant people to work with, but very few reach the highest echelons of true greatness. And in fact, surveying thousands of developers and talking about this, what I find is the true greats tend to appear about once a decade. Maybe we can fix that. Wouldn't it be great if we could figure out what that secret sauce is to create truly great developers, distill this down into a 30 or so minute keynote, disseminate this to everybody at Devnexus, and we all leave richer, wiser, and more importantly, great. So I wrote this talk and it started with the obvious question. What does every developer need to know in order to be great? But like all great philosophical questions, there are no answers. There are just more questions. And the question that came up after this, more importantly, was how does one even define a great developer? Now, I could ask myself, but modesty forbids me from answering such a direct question. I could ask other developers that I know, but most of them would struggle for the very same reason. Ultimately, the problem is, well, we're all great, right? And I think virtually every one of us has had that moment where we wrote our code and it compiled and ran perfectly the first time, and we didn't have to go to Stack Overflow 20 times. And we feel that moment of pride where we're like, we are rounding a corner. I'm finally getting the hang of this. And I can't speak for anybody but myself. But every single time I have ever had that thought, it is like I summoned the wrath of the coding gods and they turned right around and smote me. I think that's the past tense of smite. I don't know. I'm going to go with it. And that's the problem. We're all great developers in the same way that we're all great drivers. 93% of us believe we're above average drivers. That's not how averages work. In driving or in software engineering, at least half of us have to occupy that western slope of the bell curve. That's just how things work. That is the law of the strong law of large numbers, and it is non-negotiable. But I think we all think we're great drivers because we only ever compare ourselves to those people who tick us off on the road, cutting across 3 lanes of traffic or whatever else they're doing, not paying attention, texting at a stoplight that has turned green. They're bad. Now, when I do those things, well, it's different. I'm in a hurry. I checked. It was clear. It was fine. You know what? You only waited half a second. Somehow it's different. And maybe that's where we need to start. Looking at this from a relative perspective, what it takes to be truly great. Because so many things are defined in this way. I think we're all great drivers compared to other people in the same way we're all not rich compared to other people. Like that's another weird little quirk. They've surveyed thousands and thousands of people across all these income brackets, and virtually nobody self-identifies as rich. Even people making 7 or 8-figure annual incomes. They're comfortable, but they're not rich. The definition of rich is anybody who earns more money than them. And usually it's about a 3x multiplier. In fact, if I look back at the early in my career when I was earning about 1/3 what I earn today, I would have considered somebody earning my current income as rich, but now I'm here. No, 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 no. I'm doing okay. But the people who are making about 3 times what I make is rich. And that's a great place to start. If we're looking for greatness and we know that we're not great, but maybe we're pretty good, then a great developer must be anybody who knows more than I do. And this one I played with for a while. And in fact, it goes right back to the very beginning for me. This was my first programming book. And in fact, this was my first program that I wrote, probably this or something very similar to it. And after I finished this innocuous looking folio and wrote a handful of programs that looked like this, I devoured all 67 pages of A Touch of Applesoft Basic, all the way to the end, to the advanced topics like if statements and for loops. And I thought by the time I finished that book, yeah, there's a Dunning-Kruger alert coming, believe me, that I had mastered the basic programming language all the way back into the 80s. And it's sad when a person peaks so young and so early in life. And I went to my neighbor for some scholarly advice. He was very technically focused, which was unusual back in the late 80s and early 90s, pre-internet and all of that. But he saw a little bit of himself in me, and he fanned the flames of that passion. And he gave me a whole stack of Byte magazines from his garage. Now, the younger folks will not remember the sublime joy of the journey of discovery that was inside every single one of those magazines. But I will never forget. I devoured every article. I lusted after every advertisement, like $900 for a 256K memory expansion card, or $1,200 will buy you a 20 megabyte external SCSI hard drive. And I wanted all of those things. I could have none of them. But I will never forget when I turned to the back of the first issue of Byte magazine that I got my hands on, because in the back, there was a basic program that you could type in yourself in your Apple II or Commodore or whatever you had back in those days, and it would probably run. And I turned the page and I saw code that looked nothing like mine. I mean, what even is this? Poke 784, comma T, poke 789, comma S, poke 779, comma D. It goes on and on like that. And that's just one line of code. I thought I understood basic, and then I saw this and realized that I understood nothing. More importantly, I was in awe of how incomprehensible that code was. Whoever wrote this, I thought they must be geniuses. They must have risen to the highest echelons of our industry, which I assumed was the only place that you got the glorious honor of writing basic programs for Byte magazine. And I strove for many, many years after that to engender that same feeling of awe and complexity in anyone who saw my code. And years later, it directly led me to writing this. This code right here is famous. This is one of my proudest achievements. And I say that because even though I wrote this code 14 years ago, not a single person has ever been able to tell me what this does. And I know as soon as I say that, I see the challenge is extended. If I'm in front of a live audience, I'd probably see people right now peering at the code, trying to make out the little details, probably noticing that, in fact, there is a name here called encode, and it takes a decoded string that gives you some clues. But what decoding and encoding we're doing is not very obvious. And also, it's written in SQL. What am I doing anything like this in SQL for? I don't know. I didn't know then. I don't know now. But I was so proud of how incomprehensibly complex this code was that I didn't just send it around to 2 peers to review. I sent it around to the entire department. That was 50 full-time SQL developers. And the most senior, the most knowledgeable person in that team responded to me. And I remember exactly what he said in the email. And I quote, "I am not smart enough to have come up with what you've come up with here. And I say that in all earnestness." I know that that's a direct quote because, of course, I saved that email. I printed it off. I framed it. It's laminated. It has come with me to job interviews. And in fact, this style of code is so unique that where I used to work 14 years ago when I wrote this, it earned a colloquial name. Carducci code, they call it. And if you were to read the new hire wiki and any of the SQL team wiki stuff, they are not very fond of Carducci code for good reason. But come on, what an accomplishment. Not only that, by the way, this is extremely efficient code, but what an accomplishment that everybody in my team couldn't understand my code, and I could just sit there smugly and say, "Oh, what's the matter? You don't understand my smart person's code?" You see, if a great developer is somebody who knows more than I do, then I must be great if I know more than my peers. And as toxic and wrong as this was, I am not alone in this. I love complexity. I love showing off. And in fact, the legendary Neil Ford observed this as well. And I love this quote. He says, "Developers are drawn to complexity like moths to a flame, frequently with the same results." So here's my problem. Although that code was clever, even I can't maintain that code, and I wrote it. If I had to change something, I would actually have to rewrite it and then re-optimize it to the point that it's write-only code. So it's clever, it's fast, but maybe it's not good. That's okay, because I've been thinking. Maybe our true greats, not somebody who knows more than I do. Instead, it's somebody who writes good code because it's clever but not good. There we go. Problem solved, settled, simple, boom, done. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Well, maybe not. I have to tell you the first time I tried to create good code. So one of my early jobs in my career, I was a mid-level developer, and they brought me in. I got to work on a product. I had some level of ownership of this product. It was really exciting. And my first day, of course, we did all the usual first day stuff. I got assigned a computer, everything else. And they didn't really have anything for me to work on yet. So my boss says, "Well, while you're getting settled in, why don't you go ahead and familiarize yourself with the code?" And so I opened up the IDE. I started scrolling through files, and oh my goodness, this wasn't good code. This was bad code. And okay, but before you say anything, yes, I know this is Visual Basic 6. Okay, look, it was a long time ago. I was young. I needed the money. Look, don't judge me. Anyway, it doesn't matter because even in VB6, there is a spectrum of good to bad. And this code is most decidedly all the way in, over to the bad side and maybe then some. If you're not familiar with Visual Basic, and I wouldn't expect you to be so, especially old pre.NET Visual Basic, I'm going to take you on a tour of some of the most egregious things that I instantly saw as I was scrolling through that code. I mean, first of all, come on, Hungarian notation? Really? In my opinion, Hungarian notation is one of the 3 worst things that ever came out of Microsoft. And then we're modifying a by ref parameter. Look, this was a long time ago, but I still remember this. And in the parlance of Visual Basic, this right here is a rookie mistake. When you pass a string to a function, it passes it implicitly by ref. It's a reference to the string, which means here, if we're modifying it in the calling function, we're modifying it in this function, it is modifying the variable in the calling function. And now we're bleeding across boundaries. It's going to have all kinds of unintended side effects. You just don't do that. And then look at this, select star from. Come on, what are we, animals? And hello, white space. Like, all of the code was like this. And I'm sitting here looking at this code, shaking my head, clicking my tongue, patting myself on the back, thinking, thank goodness these old timers have some young blood. I'm going to show them how it's done. Because objectively, and I think we can all agree, even though this is a pretty yucky language at a pretty yucky time in software engineering, this is bad code. They told me to familiarize myself with it. I did one better. I didn't just familiarize myself with the code. No, I fixed it. I turned it from bad code into good code. Look at this. And again, you might be on a small screen. You might be on a mobile device watching this right now, but it doesn't matter, because even squinting at this code, you can tell it's better. It's clean. It's beautiful. Most importantly, it's in the style that I like. But I clean this all up. No more Hungarian notation. Ugh. And I use Pascal casing for the function names, camel casing for the variable names, and no more passing parameters by ref or by val, because I read the documentation. I know that I don't have to take a table name and turn it into a SQL query to get a record set of that table. I read the documentation, and I knew that ADODB had a command type of AD command table. You just give it the table name, no modifications, and off we go. And I looked at that. I tested my code. Well, I mean, I compiled it, right? Same thing. And we shipped it in an era where shipping it literally means shipping it. It took all summer to do a deploy. We wrote attendance capture software for schools, and we would spend the entire summer going from client side to client side to client side with a visitor's badge and a floppy disk. And we would go from machine to machine to machine, run that little batch file, swap the disks out, eject, move to the next one. It took forever. This is as far away from continuous delivery as you can get. And I will never forget the first day of school. Of course, they wanted us to come in at 7:30, but like, come on, right? I'm a developer. I'm not a morning person. I'm a firm believer there should not be 2 8 o'clocks in a day. So I roll in about 8:30-ish before they start doing attendance capture. And my phone rings. That was another thing that bothered me, by the way. I can't believe they wanted their developers to answer the phones, but you know what? It's a small company. I'm a team player, whatever. And I answer the phone, and I hear a voice on the other end do this irritating thing that users do, and it just rubs me the wrong way. I hear a voice on the other end, and they say this: "Yeah, hi. I'm getting an error 800E2571." Like, they always stop there. There's an actual error message, but they just give me the code like that means something to me. And I say, "Keep reading. Index out of range." And I'm like, "Oh, that's weird. And so I'm out there creating a bug ticket, giving the usual spiel, trying to placate the customer. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. We've got top engineers on this right now. We'll get you a resolution very, very soon." And as soon as I kind of talk them down and get them off the ledge, I go to hang up the phone, and I see something that I've never seen before. Every light on that phone was lit up. Turns out we had 20 lines. I had no idea. So, awfully busy morning. I answer line 2. "Thank you for calling. I'm sorry to keep you waiting." That was in our script. "Sorry to keep you waiting. How may I help you?" "Yeah, hi. We're getting an error 800E2571. What a coincidence. I'm going to add you to the bug ticket. We're already aware of this. We're on it, and we'll be in touch shortly. Give you 3 guesses what the third caller was calling about. I'd let you guess on the fourth caller too, but at that point, I stopped answering the phone. I disappeared from my desk, and I spent the rest of the day in the bathroom. Because remember that whole by val, by ref thing that we were talking about? Yeah, they knew that. and they were stripping the concatenated strings back out. I don't know how this didn't get caught in test, although I did try to use that old chestnut and say, well, QA should have caught this, but that dog didn't hunt. They were stripping it out, and the thing is, they were using instra to find the position of a string that they needed to clean back out that got modified in the called function. And instra, when it doesn't find the string that you're looking for, returns -1. Now, mid is the Visual Basic substring function, and -1 is not a valid starting position. So this will throw an exception. Now, if you look at this code, you will find a distinct lack of error handling, not even the glorious on error resume next, which was actually a language feature. In other words, you're telling the compiler, it's Visual Basic. How bad could it be? Get an exception, just keep going. People would write their software like this. But yeah, I spent the rest of the day in the bathroom. The next day, I threw a sickie, and the day after that, I came into work. I wanted to kind of sneak in, so I rolled in around 9:30. I took the side door, that way Lumberg wouldn't see me, but he did. My boss was standing right there, almost like he was waiting for me. And I just make eye contact with him. The first thing he says is, Michael, glad you're feeling better. Conference room in 5? Those were 5 of the longest minutes of my life. I'm in that meeting room. My boss walks in, sits down on the corner of the desk in a very friendly manner, and he addresses me in a way that, in my experience, only the Brits can pull off. You see, it was a mixture of politeness and anger, charm and contempt. He looked at me and smiled and says, Michael, what the hell were you thinking, mate? I had reasons for what I did. I had motivations. I had ideals. I had philosophies. But in that moment, language failed me. The only utterance I could eke out was a very faint and meek, I fixed it. My boss looks at me and shakes his head. He says, Michael, now, I believe what we're having here is one of our Anglo-American linguistic disagreements. Let me give you an example, he says. Here in England, we invented a game that you play with your feet and a ball. We call it football. Now, you Yanks invented a ball that you play with your hand and a ball. You call that football. Here in England, the birthplace of the English language, to have fixed something requires a transformation from a non-functional to a functional state predicated on an intervention. Now, I think you'll find in this particular instance, the opposite is true. I believe it went from a functional to a non-functional state as a result of your intervention. Now, I'm no linguistic scholar, but I believe that is the opposite of what you would call fixed. I had nothing. All I could utter out was another, I fixed it. Michael, we'll try this again. And we went rounds and rounds and rounds, and I had no words other than fixed. And finally, in his mic drop moment, he was done. He looked at me, he says, well, you might be right, but I like the way that my broke code works better than the way that your fixed code doesn't. I don't know how I didn't get fired, but I must have came close. They didn't fire me. They gave me one of those go away, kid, you bother me projects. Something so small in scope that the blast radius would have to be constrained. They just said, go work on this, go optimize this. One module, don't touch anything else, constrain blast radius, what could possibly go wrong? Oh, they underestimated me. And then they gave me 6 weeks to work on this? I can get in a lot of trouble in 6 weeks. I can make that blast radius huge in 6 weeks. So maybe good here is subjective in some cases, but they gave me an opportunity and I took it. I decided to double down on greatness in a way that can be measured. They asked me to optimize it. I said, yes. Good style is subjective. My style versus your style, but speed and efficiency can be measured. The best developers don't write good code, they write the fastest code. And I took some time to optimize it, and I still had about a month of time left. So I didn't just speed this up. I didn't just optimize this. No, I took the mantle and the challenge of extreme optimization. By the way, I have to stop here because I love this photo. It is unfortunately not me. People who know me, they know that I'm a sports skydiver. I'm a licensed skydiver. I've got hundreds of jumps under my belt, but I don't have a photo like this, and it kills me. Now, I've had plenty of opportunity, but the problem is, like, nobody's going to lend me. All my friends know me too well to lend me a laptop for the weekend. And I don't want to just get like some broken, inoperable paperweight because that just feels crass to me, you know? I want to get that laptop, jump out of an airplane, and actually write code on the way down. And there are two really important reasons for this. First of all, bragging rights. I think I already hold the title for the world's first magic trick card trick in freefall, and I might write the first program in freefall. I'm a pretty fast faller, so maybe I could get the world's fastest coder. I don't know. But the more important reason, and I'm just going to be right up, flat out obvious with you, the reason that I want this picture is, and to actually do this challenge of writing code in freefall, is the jokes. Like, the jokes write themselves, man, seriously. You get out the door, you get it there. I got my laptop, I get stable, I got about 45 useful seconds of free fall, so I'm frantically trying to type some program in there and hit run and compile and see if it works before I get that little beep in my ear where it's time to deploy. I've got an audible altimeter, so I deploy my parachute, and the G-forces of the deploying parachute and the deceleration associated cause me to drop the laptop, and I'm watching it fall down towards the ground, thinking to myself, I'm glad there's only a few houses down there. And I take control of my parachute, I grab my steering toggles, and I steer back to the drop zone, and I land, and all my developer friends are there waiting for me. And they're dying to know, did it work? Did it run? Did it compile? And I can say it crashed. Yes, that is a laugh track, by the way. This is a talk about ego, and I don't just do this for you. I do this for me, and since I don't have a live audience to laugh at my jokes, I have a button that I can press because I need that kind of validation. Anyway, it crashed, and that's not the worst. They just keep going. Well, what program did you write? Hello, world. Are you going to try again? Well, it's in pieces everywhere. I'd have to defragment my hard drive. What was the best part of it? Cloud deployments were a breeze. Thank you. Thank you. I write my own jokes. So this is what happened. They said, optimize this code. I optimized it. I took it from high-level VB to pretty low-level OS Windows 32 API functions, down to the point that I'm really just moving bytes of memory around. And I thought about this because I had about a month to go, and I asked the question, could this be faster? And the answer, surprisingly, was yes. I looked at this and I said, well, I'm mostly just moving bytes of memory around. I could do this in assembly language. You know, they say that you can't mix assembly and VB6 in the same project. Lazy people say that. You got a whole lot of time to kill and nothing else to do. You can figure it out. I learned that year that the VB6 compiler was the same as the Visual C++ compiler, meaning I could use all of the same command line arguments. And one of the first things I did when I started playing with this is I compiled my code down to assembly. And I realized that it follows a pretty standard project format. In fact, all I have to do is look at the module that it compiled that had my code in it and pull the compiler decoration from the module name and the method names. So I could replace that wholesale, knowing that compiler decoration with a custom module I wrote in W32 ASM. So I did. In the main source tree, nothing but a stub. The real module was written in assembly. And you know what? It was fast. That code screamed. It soared like an eagle on angel dust. It was wonderful. It was one of my proudest achievements. Now, of course, I'm a team player, and the build process involves about 20 or so steps, manual steps. So I went ahead and took care of the build that year. And then I did what anybody would do. I quit my job and I left the country. I moved back to the United States without a trace, by the way. I'm surprised that they found me, but they did. About 6 or 7 months after I quit, I'm here in Denver, Colorado. I'm walking up Pearl Street Mall. My phone rings, and the first thing I think is +44. That's England. So I answer the phone, and I hear the voice on the other end. Michael! It was my old boss. How are you? How are things in the States? How was the move? Are you doing well? Anyway, enough of that. Quick question. That code you optimized, where is it? You see, it was just a stub in the source tree. So I start telling him how to find it. Of course, he can't, because after I left, they migrated source control platforms. And they did it the classic way of, well, what we do is we check everything out of the old source code and then we check it into the new source tree. We don't need history. And in the process, of course, they cleaned it up because people checked in a lot of cruft. They checked in compiler artifacts and the bin folder and all this junk that just had no business being there. And my assembly modules got swept up. What the heck is this? This doesn't look like source code. It's gone. So I started to explain to my old boss how to recreate that file. I started to explain to my boss how to recreate that file. And he said, he stopped me and he says, I have a better idea. You will do it. Now, of course, I just made an international move and those thrills don't come cheap. So I was thinking I could use a little freelance. And I said I could use a little bit of freelance. And I said to them, I, I don't know if everybody can hear that, but I'm getting some Control Studio chatter. I don't know if you mean to be on mic, folks. Anyway, we'll keep going. I'll try to turn this out. I'm going to turn my volume down. I said I could use a little bit of consulting money, and using all my not inconsiderable negotiation and communication skills, of course, I talked him up to a price of free and a schedule of now. And that's what we did. I rewrote it for them and optimized VB6. It wasn't nearly as fast, but it was kind of a valuable lesson in avoiding the extreme optimization. And maybe it didn't make me as great as I thought. And I realized that, well, maybe a good programmer knows how to make low-level optimizations, but a great programmer knows when to leave them alone. One of my friends, a very deep Java, JVM, compiler, garbage collection guy, he gives a lot of talks on low-level optimizations than JVM, and I love the way that he starts his talks. He says, this almost certainly isn't your bottleneck, but we're going to talk about this anyway. And it's useful to have this, but it's even more useful to have some discernment and discretion. So great developers writing the fastest code? Probably not. Although I did have bragging rights, because back in the early aughts when I was a VB6 developer, I used to get looked down my nose quite a bit by my Java developer friends. They're like, hey, how's that Visual Basic job you got? And I was waiting. I was dying for that to come up one more time. And I could come back with, well, actually, my last project was in assembly. Can you hang with that? I didn't think so. Unfortunately, that conversation only ever took place in the shower. I never got to have that conversation. So also, it turns out great programmers don't just use real languages. And there's other ways to be great. Writing all the code, knowing all the answers, never releasing a bug. No, it worked on my machine. The longest hours, the loudest, the least willing to compromise, the not invented here syndrome. I have to build everything myself to prove something somehow. And these are just a few. And I have stories from the last 21 years to illustrate all of these. And the problem is, as a society, we tend to define greatness by individual results. We're hot off the heels of a very memorable Super Bowl, and there's a lot of discussion of who the greatest of all time is in football. We have a perennial conversation about who the greatest of all time is in basketball, and I'm sure if you follow those sports, you have opinions. But this individual results approach just doesn't seem to hold up so well in our space. And I wonder, when I look back at my career, the reason that I have consistently failed to achieve greatness is because I keep focusing inwards. And maybe that's it. Because I don't think great is something that can be measured. Great can't be defined objectively. Great isn't the code that you write, it's the value that you produce. And sometimes value can be created by not writing any code at all. Like when I look at these specific stories, this right here, by the way, this function is actually a SQL URL encode. That was my idea. Need to URL encode a string? Make a database call. Because I'm a SQL developer, that's my hammer, and every problem is a nail. It was crazy efficient, but who cares? I didn't add any outward value, just inward value. I added a little bit of outward value here, but changing something without the test, without me taking ownership of everything around it, that created a net negative value. This is just me imposing my opinions on my team. You should write code like I write code, in the words of the immortal nerdcore rapper Standard Out. Opinions, man, that is a great song. Look that up. So the extreme optimization, again, I just wanted to show off. That's it. Like, it was fast enough and I wanted to show off. And the thing is, inwardly I can show off, but outwardly I can create something valuable for the team, for the organization, for the customer. And that's what I'm realizing is greatness cannot be found by looking inwards. It can only be found outwards. In 21 years, the common thread of my experiences, all the developers that I've talked to, the common thread of the greats that they've worked with, the great developers consistently bring value to the team, the organization, and ultimately the customer. And value is one of those slippery, nebulous things. And sometimes people are like, well, what do you mean value? And I look at it like this: if you're solving the problems of the business and the customer, as simple as that, you're creating value. And this might be the most important lesson that I've learned in my career. This notion of value, letting value and understanding drive my efforts, starting with why, all of these things, this ability to think outwardly and cultivate empathy. These types of skills will last longer than any language I've learned in my career. Obviously, it's been a very long time since I've coded VB. That is long gone. 3 or 4 languages that I've learned, I never touch anymore. I've gone from framework to framework to framework to framework every couple of years. Right now, I'm super excited about Micronaut and doing a lot of microservice stuff there. But in a couple of years, I'm probably going to be looking at something else. These technologies and frameworks, they come and go, but these core skills, they will last for as long as we want to be employed. To quote a good friend and fellow speaker and just interesting thinker, Matt Stein, he hit the nail on the head. He says, if you're able to create business value, then you will be in demand, regardless of anything else. And I want to be really clear. This isn't easy. 21 years into my career now, and I still have to remind myself to check my ego and my expectations and my agenda at the door. I have great peers on my architecture team who hold me accountable, who will call me on this from time to time. They hold me accountable. I hold them accountable because ultimately greatness is not a destination. It's a journey. And it's a beautiful thing to strive towards if the greatness improves the people around us. And that brings us to the end. And I just want to thank everybody here the folks who made it this far into my rambling stories, the folks who are here supporting this wonderful conference in these challenging times that we find ourselves in. The staff have worked extremely hard, put together an incredible event. We've had great speakers all throughout the day. And so I certainly want to thank the staff and the speakers, and shout out again to LeVar Burton. That was just, I have no words for how excited I was. But thanks to everybody, and thanks to everybody here listening and being part of this passionate developer community, because the people who are here owning their craft and sitting through a non-technical keynote at the end of a long day, you are the people who are thoughtful and and trending in that direction of greatness. And I honor you and I thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure and a privilege.
Thank you, Michael.
I think we'll switch back over to here.
There we go. Hey, Michael, thanks for that wonderful keynote. Now, I have a question for you.
You got it.
Has anybody more famous, have you ever closed for somebody more famous before?
I don't think so. And honestly, that's what I'm putting. Like if a speaker resume was a thing, that's what I would put on there.
That's right.
2021 closed. You know, LeVar Burton opened for me.
That's right. LeVar Burton opened for me, not the other way around, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, Michael. Well, thank you so much for doing the keynote. That was an excellent talk. We were a little worried about how people would perceive the title of ego-driven development, right? Because as you know, in our industry, we love to over-engineer the crap out of everything, and shiny new toy syndrome, NIH syndrome, all those different types of things. So I thought that was a wonderful keynote, especially the last thing you spoke about, which was providing business value and how it means, like, at the end of the day, that means like everything, right? So.
And it took me so long to figure that out. I've got to say that's like if I could go back in time and tell my young junior developer self one thing, think about business value, learn how to articulate business value, because it is so much easier to make things happen in an organization if I can frame the conversation not around how this thing is going to make my life better, but how it's going to deliver more value. Oh, we could still be using Java 6, or we can upgrade. Well, we could do it your way or this other way. This one takes 3 weeks and this one will take 3 months. Obviously, that's a business decision. And my speed to market focused PO is like, well, let's do the 3-week thing. And you're like, okay, that's a great idea. Let's go with your idea.
You know what, Michael? I think that really dovetails nicely with what Lauren was speaking about this morning in terms of doing that press release, especially in this remote work from home environment, where you do like a press release on yourself and say, hey, this is what I've done. Not to the outside world, but to your team. I think that dovetails nicely with the idea of providing the business value, and then you let people on your team know that, hey, this is what I've done for the team, and this is what we should do together in terms of teamwork, right? So.
Yeah. And also the business value, being able to communicate that and speak that language has been vital. My current gig, I'm a principal software engineer, principal software architect, and I've got to talk to the business folks all the time, and I got to talk their language, and I've got to talk about things that they care about. And they don't care about Kafka topics and microservices. They care about speed to market and agility and all of these user satisfaction and all these things. So we got to translate that stuff back and forth. And I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't learned these hard lessons in the past.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, we won't keep you any longer. I thank you again for coming. As you alluded to already, you are a magician. So maybe we can get you over here next year, and you'll play my favorite trick that I've seen you do, where you put a $100 bill in my pocket. How's that?
Oh man, that is my favorite too. It does get a little expensive, but man,
all right, thank you.
Especially the bar tab after.
The bar tab after, of course. Thank you so much, Michael. We appreciate it, and hopefully we can get you down here next to Atlanta. All right, folks. So
I'm excited.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right, everybody. We're at the end of a long day. I'm glad that you were able to hang with us all day. We just have one more quick announcement, and then we'll move on to the OSRR Jam after party. All right. So hang on just a second. We're going to switch views just real quick.